Somewhere in the Alabama River Valley, between the sprawling cotton estates of Montgomery County and the Old Creek territories, there exists a sealed courthouse record that local historians refuse to discuss. It contains a testimony of 7 enslaved people who described a series of strange ceremonies they witnessed in the cellar of Willow Bend Plantation between March and September of 1845. Ceremonies that their mistress, Mrs. Helena Rutled, conducted in total darkness, while speaking languages none of them could recognize. When the magistrate pressed the witnesses on what exactly Mrs. Rutled was trying to accomplish with these gatherings, the testimonies became so disturbing that the court ordered the documents sealed for 50 years, and later extended that seal indefinitely. 3 of the 7 witnesses vanished from county records entirely within 6 months of giving their statements. What those people saw in that cellar wasn't witchcraft or simple superstition. It was something far more deliberate, something rooted in obsessions that wealthy Southern women were never supposed to have. Knowledge that no plantation mistress should ever have possessed. But before we continue with the story of Helena Rutled and the unexplainable events at Willow Bend Plantation, I need to ask you something important. If you're fascinated by historical mysteries that blur the line between documented fact and unspeakable truth, then subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell and drop a comment telling me what state or city you're listening from. I want to know just how far these forgotten American stories are reaching. Now, let's uncover what really happened in that Alabama cellar, and why the truth was so dangerous it had to be buried for generations. The story of Willow Bend doesn't begin with Helena Rutled herself, but with the peculiar circumstances that brought her to Montgomery in the first autumn of 1843. Montgomery County at that time stood at a crossroads between the old and the new Alabama. The memory of the creek removal was still fresh. That forced westward march had ended less than a decade earlier. White settlers had since claimed the richest bottomlands with the certainty of conquerors. Cotton ruled absolutely. The deep black soil of the Alabama River Valley produced harvests that made men rich in a single season. Montgomery had grown from a rough trading post into something approaching civilization, with broad streets, a freshly painted state house, and enough lawyers to argue property disputes for a generation. Willow Bend Plantation sat 7 miles southwest of town, on a bend in the river where the current slowed and the water ran deep and dark. The estate covered nearly 800 acres, 200 under cultivation, the rest thick with old-growth forest that locals avoided after sunset, not out of superstition, but because creek burial grounds still dotted those woods. And even the most practical men knew better than to disturb the dead. The plantation house itself rose 3 stories high, built of brick hauled upriver from Mobile. Its white columns gleamed in the sun, and its broad galleries caught every evening breeze. 12 rooms on the main floor, 8 above, and beneath it all, a cellar that stretched the full length of the house, divided into storage rooms, a root cellar, and what the previous owner had called the wine room, though he'd stored very little wine there, preferring to keep his finer bottles in a smaller vault beneath the kitchen. Samuel Rutledge purchased Willow Bend in 1837, paying $32,000, a fortune that spoke to both the property's worth and his own wealth. He had made his money in shipping, first in Charleston, later in Mobile. He married Helena Prescott of Savannah in 1835, when she was 19 and he was 47. The marriage raised few eyebrows. Age gaps meant little when dowries were large and family connections valuable. Helena brought $6,000 and ties to one of Georgia's oldest families. Samuel brought fortune and future. Together, they moved to Willow Bend with 43 enslaved people, purchasing 20 more in Montgomery to work the expanded cotton fields. Samuel hired an overseer, a lean man named Garrett Phelps, who knew cotton and cruelty in equal measure. The plantation thrived. Yields were high, money flowed, and everything ran efficiently. Then, in the spring of 1843, Samuel died, thrown from his horse while inspecting the southern fields. His neck broke, so cleanly that the doctor said he never felt a thing. Helena was 27, a widow now, inheriting everything: the land, the house, the enslaved people, the cotton operation, and debts so small they hardly mattered. Most women in her position would have sold the property or remarried quickly, but Helena did neither. 2 weeks after the funeral, she dismissed Garrett Phelps, paid him to the end of the month, and told him his services were no longer required. She interviewed 3 potential overseers and hired none of them. Instead, she gathered the enslaved community of Willow Bend and announced that she would manage the plantation herself. Work would continue as before, and she would tolerate no defiance. It was unusual, but not unheard of. Several wealthy widows across the South managed their estates with remarkable skill. But what made Helena different, what first stirred unease among both the enslaved workers and Montgomery's polite society, was how she changed after Samuel's death. She spent hours in the plantation's small library, a room Samuel had filled with agricultural journals and law books. Reading by lamplight until dawn, she rode the property alone, sometimes vanishing into forested sections for entire afternoons. She began making frequent trips to Montgomery, 3, sometimes 4 times a week, but not for shopping or social calls. She visited lawyers, the county clerk, and most strangely, a German cartographer named Wilhelm Briner, who had recently settled in town and specialized in detailed property surveys and historical maps. The first ceremony took place on the night of March 13, 1845. At the time, none of the enslaved people at Willow Bend understood what they were witnessing. Not until much later, when a pattern began to emerge. Esther, the plantation's cook, was the first to notice the preparations. Helena had ordered her to clean the large cellar chamber, the one known as the wine room. The room, though few bottles remained there now, had to be cleaned thoroughly. Helena had ordered Esther to scrub the brick floor and stone walls with lye soap until everything gleamed. When Esther asked if the mistress planned to store something new down there, Helena simply replied that the space needed to be properly maintained. Nothing more. It took Esther and her daughter, Celia, 2 full days to finish. The cellar was damp, the air heavy with the scent of earth and old brick. The chamber stretched about 30 feet long and 20 wide, with a vaulted ceiling that made every sound echo strangely. Small windows near ground level offered only the faintest light, so Esther worked by lantern. The flickering glow threw restless shadows across the walls, making the room feel smaller than it was, more confined, almost breathing. On the evening of March 12th, Helena gave new instructions. Esther was to move 4 chairs into the cellar and arrange them facing one another in the center of the room. She was to bring no lamps, no candles, nothing that produced light. When Esther hesitated, saying she didn't like working in darkness, Helena told her the arrangement was for guests who value privacy, and that she shouldn't concern herself with matters that didn't involve her. That night, close to midnight, a covered carriage approached Willow Bend. Inside were 3 women. Isaiah, who tended the stables, saw them arrive but couldn't make out their faces in the dark. They wore heavy cloaks despite the warm night, hoods drawn tight, and they moved quickly from the carriage to the house without a word. Helena met them at the door herself, something she almost never did, and led them not to the parlor, not to the dining room, but straight to the cellar stairs. Celia was still awake in the small cabin she shared with her mother. A cough had kept her up for weeks, and she needed water. Moving quietly so as not to draw punishment for wandering late, she walked toward the main house. The kitchen door, as always, was unlocked. As she stepped inside, she stopped. Voices were drifting up from below, from the cellar, muffled but clear. She knew she shouldn't go closer. Every instinct told her to take her water and leave. But curiosity, that dangerous, familiar pull, drew her toward the slightly open cellar door. She crouched where she could hear, without being seen. 4 voices, all women, One of them was unmistakably Helena's. The other three were strangers, their accents polished and refined, the sound of privilege and education. They weren't praying, not in any way Celia recognized. The words were deliberate, rhythmic, almost ceremonial, but in no language she knew. Not English, not French, not the scattered Spanish or Creek phrases she'd picked up from others over the years. Then Helena spoke, her tone steady, commanding. We bind ourselves to the purpose. We bind ourselves to the method. We bind ourselves to the future that will not be denied. The others repeated her words exactly, their voices overlapping until they became a single sound. Then came silence. So complete, Celia thought the ceremony might be over. She considered slipping away. She should have, but she stayed. In that stillness, she heard something else. A faint rustle, like pages turning. Many pages, handled by many hands. Then a metallic sound, metal striking stone. Steady, repetitive, like the ticking of an enormous clock echoing through the dark. It went on for what felt like an hour, though it could not have been more than 15 minutes. Then Helena's voice again, this time in English. The first mark is made. The first boundary is established. What we have begun will continue until the measure is complete. That was enough. Celia turned and slipped away as quietly as she'd come, her thirst forgotten. Back in the cabin, she said nothing to her mother, but she did not sleep. When dawn came, she felt as though she had spent the night holding her breath. Just before sunrise, the covered carriage left Willow Bend, the three cloaked women inside. Helena appeared at breakfast calm and composed, giving her usual instructions for the day's work as if nothing at all had happened. But Esther, serving coffee in the dining room, noticed something she had never seen before. A small mark on Helena's left wrist. It looked like a brand or a tattoo. Two intersecting lines would circle at their meeting point, drawn in black ink, so deep it seemed to absorb the light around it. Throughout April and into May, a pattern began to form, disturbing in its precision. Every 3 weeks, almost a day, that same covered carriage would arrive near midnight, bringing the same 3 women to Willow Bend. They would spend hours in the cellar with Helena, their muffled voices drifting through the night, speaking in that strange, unearthly language, conducting whatever business bound them together in secrecy. Among the enslaved community, quiet whispers began to spread. No one spoke openly, too dangerous, but people wondered. Moses, an older man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything, believed the women were conducting some kind of secret business, something they didn't want their husbands or anyone else to know. Women weren't supposed to own property, to make deals, to act without men's approval. Maybe, Moses reasoned, this was simply their way around the law. It was a comforting idea, an explanation that didn't require believing in darker things. But it didn't explain the marks. Over the next few months, similar symbols began appearing on the wrists of other women in Montgomery society. Small, black, and precise, identical to Helena's. They would flash into view when a glove slipped or a sleeve shifted at a dinner or church service, only to vanish again as quickly as they appeared. Meanwhile, Helena herself was changing. She spent even more time in the library, but the books she read were different now. They weren't the agricultural journals or law texts Samuel had left behind. These were old volumes, bindings frayed, pages yellowed, written in languages Esther could not name. Helena had hired someone to teach her those languages. That much was clear. Sometimes she read aloud softly, testing pronunciations, and the sounds were unlike anything Esther had ever heard. Not European, not familiar. Then, in early May, Helena made another unexpected decision. She gathered 7 enslaved people from Willow Bend: Esther, Celia, Moses, Isaiah, a young woman named Rachel who tended the gardens, Thomas, who maintained the tools and machinery, and a boy of about 14 named Benjamin. She informed them that they Helena informed the 7 of them that from now on, they would serve the house exclusively. No more field work. They would tend to the main house, the nearby grounds, and attend to any needs she specified. Their quarters were moved closer to the house, into a long cabin that had one stored equipment. The new arrangement made them both privileged and exposed. Better food, lighter work, but also constant proximity to Helena's strange activities. They were always near the gatherings, the preparations, and whatever came after. It was Rachel who first noticed the changes in the cellar itself. Helena had ordered her to clean the chamber after one of those midnight meetings, and Rachel found things that hadn't been there before. Scratches on the brick floor, not random, but arranged in deliberate geometric patterns. Small piles of ash in the corners, smelling of burned paper. And strangest of all, the temperature of the room. It felt too warm, as if the very stone walls retained heat like metal left in the sun. When Rachel mentioned the warmth to Moses, he told her sharply to forget she'd noticed. Clean what she was told to clean, nothing more. But Rachel was young, and curiosity has a way of gnawing at the cautious. She began paying closer attention during the days, watching Helena's movements, noting when the mistress left for Montgomery and what she brought back. One afternoon in late May, Rachel saw Helena return from town with a package wrapped in canvas, about the size of a large book. Helena carried it herself straight into the library, refusing any help. When Rachel later passed by, she found the door locked, something that had never happened before. The next midnight meeting took place on June 3rd, and this time, Celia was deliberately positioned near the cellar door by her mother. Esther had begun to fear that whatever was happening might soon involve all of them, that they might be forced to witness or even participate in things they didn't understand. Better to know what awaited them than to stumble into it blind. Celia crouched in the darkness of the kitchen, listening. This time there were 5 voices, not 4. Helena and 4 guests. The language was the same. That strange, rhythmic chanting that made the hair on Celia's arms rise. But there was something new as well, a smell that drifted up from the cellar. Sharp, metallic, like iron left too long in water, like blood beginning to oxidize. Then, in English, Helena spoke words that would stay with Celia for the rest of her life. The second mark is made. The second boundary is established. We are closer to completion than any who came before us. One of the other women replied, her voice trembling with emotion. Excitement, maybe, or something that sounded like religious devotion. How many remain? She asked. Helena's answer was calm, almost serene. 7. 7 more, and the work of 20 years will bear fruit. 7 more, and everything they said was impossible will manifest in physical form. By midsummer, the heat had settled over Montgomery County like a heavy hand. The cotton fields shimmered under the relentless sun, and the river crawled slow and low through the valley. The enslaved people at Willow Bend worked through it all as they always had, but now there was an added weight, a shared understanding that something was building, that Helena and her mysterious visitors were following a sequence, each meeting bringing them closer to some final purpose. And when that purpose was fulfilled, no one believed it would end harmlessly. Moses decided to investigate. He was old enough to recognize patterns, careful enough to survive them, and wise enough to know that knowledge could be as dangerous as ignorance. He began watching Helena's trips into town more closely, which building she entered, how long she stayed, and who she met. The pattern became clear. Helena met often with Wilhelm Briner, the German cartographer. Their meetings sometimes lasted hours. She also visited a lawyer named Josiah Hammond and a doctor named Edward Finch, though she showed no sign of illness. Most curiously, she made monthly visits to a small print shop run by a man named Cyrus Greenwald, a newcomer from Massachusetts who specialized in printing documents for lawyers and publishers. Moses could not follow her inside or overhear what was said, but he could see what she carried out. Helena often returned with papers, official-looking ones, and sometimes items carefully wrapped, shaped like books or manuscripts. Then, in July, Benjamin, the youngest of the 7 chosen to work in the house, stumbled upon something that finally gave shape to the mystery. He'd been ordered to organize the shelves in the library, dusting and rearranging the heavy old volumes. Helena had stepped out briefly, and Benjamin, who could read, though he kept that secret close, couldn't resist looking at one of the books she'd been studying. It was ancient, the binding cracked, the pages yellow and brittle. The text was in English, but the kind of English that twisted and coiled, requiring slow, careful reading. The title page, handwritten rather than printed, read, "A true account of the mysteries practiced by the women of the Carpathian territories, and their methods for achieving influence beyond natural law. Compiled by Brother Augustine, year of our Lord 1721. Benjamin had only moments to read before hearing Helena's footsteps return, but what he saw burned itself into his mind like a fever dream. The book described rituals performed by groups of women across Eastern Europe, women who had discovered methods, not magical, the text insisted, but methodical, almost scientific in their precision. They achieved specific outcomes through carefully measured sequences of actions, words, and something called blood contracts. Though, according to the author, the term was meant symbolically, not literal blood, but something deeper. These women, the book said, operated in total secrecy, passing their knowledge down through generations, never recording the full methods in any single place. They were told they would now serve only the house, no more field work. From that moment on, their duties were confined to main house and its immediate grounds, tending to every task Helena demanded. Their living quarters were moved closer, into a long cabin that had one-stored tools and equipment. The change made them both privileged and exposed. They received better food and lighter work, but at the cost of constant proximity to Helena, constant exposure to whatever she was doing, to her gatherings, her preparations, and the strange aftermaths that followed each meeting. It was Rachel who first began to notice changes in the cellar itself. One night, after one of Helena's secret midnight gatherings, she was ordered to clean the space, and there, she found things that hadn't been there before. Scratches carved into the brick floor, patterns that seemed deliberate, small piles of ash gathered neatly in corners, carrying the faint scent of burned paper. And strangest of all, the temperature of the room. It felt warm, unnaturally so, as if the stone walls themselves retained heat like metal after hours in the sun. When Rachel mentioned it to Moses, he told her flatly to forget it, to clean what she was told to clean and ask no questions. But Rachel was young, curious, and her mind wouldn't let go of what she'd seen. She began paying closer attention during the day, watching Helena's movements carefully. She took note of when Helena went into town and what she brought back. One afternoon in late May, Rachel saw her return from Montgomery with a parcel wrapped tightly in canvas, about the size of a large book. Helena carried it herself, refusing any help, and went straight into the library. Later, when Rachel tried the door, she found it locked, something that had never happened before. The next midnight gathering came on June 3rd. This time, Celia was placed near the cellar door by her mother, who feared that sooner or later they might all be drawn into whatever Helena was doing, that refusal might not be an option. Better to know what awaited them than to be caught blind. Celia listened from the darkness of the kitchen. She couldn't see, but she could hear. There were 5 voices this time, not 4. Helena and 4 visitors. The same eerie language filled the air, a strange chant that made the hairs on her arms rise. But now there was something else. A smell, sharp and metallic, drifting up from the cellar, like iron left too long in water, like blood beginning to oxidize. Then Helena spoke in English, words that would stay with Celia for the rest of her life. The second mark is made. The second boundary is established. We are closer to completion than any who came before us. Another woman responded, her tone trembling with an emotion Celia couldn't name. Perhaps excitement, perhaps religious ecstasy. How many remain? Helena's voice was calm. Sure. 7. 7 more, and the work of 20 years will bear fruit. 7 more, and what they called impossible will take form. As summer descended on Montgomery County, the heat pressed down like a living weight. The cotton fields shimmered beneath the sun. The river ran slow and low, and the enslaved community at Willow Bend carried on their work under the burden of new, heavy awareness. They knew something was building, something nearing its end. Helena and her mysterious visitors seemed to be following a fixed sequence of steps, and when they reached the final one, whatever was waiting would not end quietly. Moses decided to act. Age had given him a small measure of protection, though it was a thin shield against a woman who owned his life completely. He began watching Helena's trips into town, which building she entered, how long she stayed. Patterns emerged. Helena met regularly with Wilhelm Briner, the German cartographer, each meeting lasting hours. She also visited a lawyer named Josiah Hammond and a doctor, Edward Finch, though she showed no sign of illness. Most curious of all, she made monthly visits to a small print shop owned by a man named Cyrus Greenwald, a Massachusetts transplant who had brought a printing press south. He specialized in legal documents and small publishing contracts. Moses couldn't follow her inside or hear what was said, but he saw what she brought back: official-looking papers, printed sheets, and at times, objects wrapped in cloth, objects that might have been books or manuscripts. Then, in July, Benjamin, the youngest of 7 servants assigned to the house, stumbled upon something that offered the first real clue. He'd been told to organize the books in the library, dusting and rearranging the shelves. When Helena left the room briefly, Benjamin, who could secretly read thanks to lessons from a previous owner's children, examined one of the books she'd been studying. It was old, its leather cracked, the pages yellow and brittle. The text was in English, but archaic, difficult to follow. On the title page, written by hand, were the words, "A true account of mysteries practiced by the women of the Carpathian territories and their methods for achieving influence beyond natural law. Compiled by Brother Augustine, year of our Lord 1721. Benjamin managed to read only a few pages before Helena returned, but those few were enough to chill him. The book described rituals performed by women across Eastern Europe. Rituals not magical, it insisted, but methodical, scientific in their own way. They aimed to produce tangible results through precise actions, specific words, and something the author called blood contracts, though he claimed the blood was symbolic, not literal. These women worked in complete secrecy. The text said, passing knowledge from mother to daughter, never writing down the full method, only fragments. The complete process could be known only to the initiated few. The purpose of their work was power and permanence, to seize influence in a world that denied them both, to shape the fates of their descendants, to bind the future to their will through actions taken in the present. Benjamin replaced the book exactly where it had been and said nothing. But that night, he told Moses everything. Moses shared it with Esther and the others. The revelation changed everything. Whatever Helena was doing was no eccentric obsession or secret business deal. It was a process, a system, a ritual sequence designed to produce results. The midnight meetings weren't random. They were stages in that process, carefully timed, deliberately planned. The question now haunting them all was both simple and terrifying. What was Helena trying to achieve? And worse, what part would they be forced to play? The August gathering brought the same 5 women again. This time, Isaiah positioned himself near one of the narrow cellar windows. The glass was old, warped, but through it he saw a faint movement, shapes lit by a glow that wasn't candlelight. It was a phosphorescent blue-white light that didn't flicker, but stayed steady and cold. In that eerie illumination, Isaiah saw the 5 women seated in a circle, hands clasped. In the center stood an open book on a stand. Helena read aloud while the others responded. their voices weaving into a rhythm that made Isaiah's teeth ache. Then Helena drew a knife, small, silver, and Isaiah's heart froze. But she didn't strike anyone. Instead, she sliced her own palm, letting her blood fall onto the open pages. 3 drops. Then each woman did the same. 15 drops total, absorbed instantly, leaving no stain. Helena's voice rang clear through the glass. The 6th mark is made. The 6th boundary is established. We approach the completion that will secure for us and our daughters what no law and no man will grant. We approach the moment when property and power will pass through our hands and remain there, unbreakable, undeniable. Isaiah stumbled back from the window, sickened not by the blood, but by Helena's certainty. The conviction that this was working, that it was real, that it would change something tangible in the world. By September, the air had grown cooler, but the tension at Willow Bend thickened like storm humidity. Helena became consumed, locked in the library for days, giving only curt orders when she emerged. She no longer went to church. She no longer hosted or visited anyone. People in Montgomery began whispering about Helena Rutledge's reclusion, about the women who arrived at her home after dark, about the strange marks some of them bore on their wrists. But whispers were just whispers. Helena was wealthy, and the eccentricities of the rich were tolerated where the same behavior from the poor would have brought ruin. Then, one evening in early September, Esther overheard a conversation that tied everything together. 2 of the visiting women had arrived early, before nightfall, and spoke in the parlor before descending to the cellar. Serving tea that she knew would go untouched, Esther listened as they discussed property, inheritance, legal claims. One woman said sharply, "My husband's brother claims he owns the timberlands under the old deed. His lawyer says my father's will is unclear." Helena replied with calm, icy assurance, "When the 7 mark is made, such claims will fail. The binding ensures it. Property that passes through our hands, through blood or direct transfer, becomes ours beyond question. It has worked before. It will work again." The second woman asked, hesitant, "And you're certain about the timing?" "That September 21st is correct." Helena didn't hesitate. The calculations are exact. Wilhelm confirmed the alignments. The 21st is the only proper date for the next decade, the only one where lunar phase, planetary position, and the anniversary of our first mark all coincide. Everything must be exact. The method is scientific, not supernatural. It follows natural law. We simply don't yet understand. Esther's hands trembled as she poured. When she left the room, she went straight to Moses and repeated every word. The 7th and final meeting was set for September 21st, just 2 weeks away. And now the 7 enslaved people caught in Helena's orbit faced an impossible choice. Should they intervene? Warn someone in town? Risk death to stop whatever was coming? Or stay silent and hope that when the final act came, it wouldn't destroy them too? That night, September 8th, they gathered in the cabin, whispering in the dark. Moses spoke first, his voice steady and low. "We can't stop her. Even if we tried," went to the sheriff, the magistrate, "who would believe us? We're enslaved people accusing a wealthy white woman of blood rights and books from Europe. They'd hang us for speaking out." Rachel shook her head. "Then we just watch? Just let it happen?" Esther looked up, her eyes hard. "We document it," she said quietly. "We remember every detail. We make ourselves witnesses in a way that can't be dismissed later, if later ever comes and matters." Thomas, who rarely spoke, added quietly, "And we prepare to run, if running becomes necessary. We note where the horses are kept, where supplies are stored. We make ourselves ready to survive whatever this brings." They agreed to this plan, such as it was, born not from courage, but from the absolute lack of better options. They would observe, remember, and survive. In that order, the days between September 8th and September 21st felt both endless and too brief at the same time. Helena made her final preparations. receiving deliveries from town, cleaning the cellar herself rather than delegating work, spending hours checking and rechecking documents and calculations that none of them were allowed to see. Then, on September 19th, just 2 days before the final ceremony, Helena did something she had never done before. She gathered all 7 in the main hall and spoke directly, her voice carrying an edge of something that might have been excitement or fear. "What I'm about to ask you might sound strange," Helena began, "but I need you to understand. What happens on the 21st is important, more important than anything you've ever witnessed before. I need all of you to remain in your quarters that night. Don't approach the main house. Don't try to observe. Don't interfere. What we're doing is delicate, and any disruption could have serious consequences." She paused, letting her eyes move across each of their faces. "I've always treated you fairly. I've never used the lash. I've never sold families apart. I've only ever been reasonable in my demands. I'm asking you now to trust that what I'm doing serves a greater purpose, one you cannot fully understand, but that does not threaten you. Can you give me that trust?" The silence stretched, heavy and uneasy, until Moses finally nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We'll stay in our quarters." Helena seemed to relax, just slightly. "Good. After the 21st. Things will return to normal. You have my word." She dismissed them, and they returned to their cabin. None of them believed for a moment that things would ever return to normal, but they'd said what she needed to hear. Now, they would do what they needed to do. The night of September 21st, 1845, arrived with perfect weather, cool, dry, and lit by a moon 3 days past full, bright enough to see, but dim enough not to feel exposed. The 7 of them stayed in their cabin as instructed, but they kept the windows open, their ears sharp, and their bodies ready for whatever might come. The evening before had brought an unexpected turn. Helena had summoned Esther alone to the main house, asking her to prepare a specific meal for the following day, not for the midnight visitors, but for Helena herself. The menu was precise: roasted chicken with herbs, each specified by their Latin names, bread made from a particular flour shipped from Charleston, vegetables measured to exact quantities, and a tea brewed from leaves Helena provided in a sealed container, leaves that smelled faintly of mint and something darker, more medicinal. "The timing matters," Helena told her voice carrying an intensity that made the cook uneasy. "I must consume this meal exactly at 6 o'clock in the evening, 3 hours before the others arrive. The preparation has been 20 years in the making, Esther, 20 years of study, of gathering knowledge, of finding others who understand what I understand. Everything must be exact." Esther followed her instructions carefully, watching as Helena ate every bite with ritualistic precision, checking a pocket watch between each course, even timing the pace at which she chewed. When she was done, Helena thanked her, a rare gesture, and told her to take the rest of the evening for herself. No one would be needed in the main house until morning. Now, as night deepened and the 7 waited in the cabin, Esther told the others about that strange meal. Moses frowned, trying to piece it together. "She's preparing herself," he said slowly, like someone ready for battle or for an ordeal. "Whatever's happening tonight," Thomas added, "she needs to be in a specific state, physical and mental. Or maybe she just believes she does. Could be she's read in one of those old books that you have to eat certain things before conducting a ceremony, and she's following instructions that mean nothing at all, or they mean everything." Rachel shook her head. "And we're about to see whether all this preparation, all these months of meetings, blood, and strange languages produces something real or just proves to be elaborate pretending." The covered carriage arrived at 11:30, bringing 5 women, just as expected. From the cabin window, Isaiah counted them as they stepped down. 5 hooded figures moving swiftly toward the main house, where Helena stood waiting at the door. 6 in total. 6 women conducting the final ceremony, the culmination of 6 months of work. Something they believed would secure their power and property through methods no law recognized, yet which they claimed followed natural principles. But this time, something was different. The women didn't go inside immediately. They gathered tightly on the front steps, and even from a distance, Isaiah could hear them, speaking in English, not the strange language they'd use in the cellar. Their voices trembled with a mix of nervousness and anticipation. One of them asked, her voice rising, "Are you certain of the calculations, Helena? Are you sure tonight is the proper convergence?" Helena's answer came calm and firm. Wilhelm checked them 3 times. The lunar phase, the planetary positions, the exact number of days since we made the first mark. Everything aligns tonight in a way that won't occur again for another 19 years. If we don't complete the binding now, everything we've done becomes meaningless. The method requires exact timing. There's no room for doubt. Then, the women entered the house. For the next 30 minutes, the watchers in the cabin saw lights moving across the main floor, brief flashes from lamps in different windows, suggesting the women were gathering their materials, making final preparations. Then, the light drifted downward into the cellar, and the house fell into darkness. Midnight came and went. No sound emerged. No light flickered. The night stood perfectly still, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the cabin, Benjamin began to feel something strange. A pressure in his ears, like the heaviness before a thunderstorm, and a sharp metallic taste in his mouth, like copper. He mentioned it quietly to Moses, who frowned and asked if anyone else felt it. They all did. A subtle wrongness hung in the air, something that could have been nothing more than their own fear and tension manifesting in their bodies, yet felt external, as if the very air itself was pressing in from the direction of the main house. At 1 a.m., Celia whispered that she couldn't stand not knowing. "The uncertainty is worse than any punishment," she said. Before anyone could stop her, she slipped out of the cabin, moving quietly toward the main house, staying in the shadows, heading for the cellar window where Isaiah had watched during the August ceremony. The others followed. They couldn't let her go alone, and they couldn't bear the ignorance any longer. Together, they reached the cellar window. 7 faces pressed close to the warped glass, peering into the space they had cleaned and prepared dozens of times. What they saw below was both ordinary and horrifying in its implication. 6 women sat in a circle, hands joined, eyes closed. A strange blue-white light illuminated them, its source invisible. The large book lay open in the center of the circle, its pages dense with writing in multiple languages, marked with dates and notations. But there were new things this time, things that hadn't been part of the previous ceremonies. 7 candles arranged in a precise pattern around the book. A bowl, silver, perhaps pewter, and papers, dozens of them, scattered across the floor, each covered in careful handwriting. Helena was speaking. Her voice carried clearly through the glass, and now they realized she had been speaking for some time, reciting words from a script that had begun before they arrived. And as those before us established boundaries through will and word and witness, so we establish our own, claiming what the law denies us, securing what society refuses to grant, binding ourselves to outcomes that transcend individual mortality and extend through generations yet unborn. Another woman took up the words seamlessly. We do not ask for divine intervention. We do not petition supernatural forces. We engage with natural law as it truly exists, not as common men perceive it. We create resonance between intention and outcome through methods that ancient practitioners recorded, methods that work not by magic, but by precise application of principle. A third woman continued. The blood we offer is symbolic, yet potent. The words we speak are deliberate and tested. The timing we honor is calculated through astronomical observation and historical precedent. What we do here is science, not sorcery. It is method, not miracle. And it will work, because those who came before proved it does. That human will, when properly focused and precisely applied, can shape probability itself. Helena opened her eyes, the others keeping theirs closed, and reached for the silver knife lying beside the book. Before she could touch it, one of the women, the one Esther had heard called Catherine Drummond, spoke sharply. "Wait, I need to know we're all committed. Once we make the seventh mark, once we complete the binding, there's no undoing it. The old texts are clear. We bind ourselves as much as we bind the future. Our property becomes linked to this circle. Our descendants become part of the pattern. If any of us have doubts, speak them now. A heavy silence filled the cellar. Then Sarah Vaughn, whose voice they recognized from before, said, "I have no doubts. My father's estate will either pass to my daughter, or it will be contested until nothing remains. The law gives me no protection. This method offers what the law denies. I'm committed." One by one, each woman affirmed her commitment. Helena nodded, satisfied. Then we proceed. With the seventh mark, we bind ourselves complete. With the seventh boundary, we establish permanence. Let the property we claim remain in our hands, and in the hands of our daughters. Let the wealth we gather remain untouchable. Let the power we secure remain absolute, bound not by supernatural force, but by the natural law of cause meeting consequence. Let what we establish tonight echo through generations, creating circumstances that favor those who share our blood and our purpose. She opened her eyes fully now, picked up the knife, and made a small cut across her left palm, deeper than before, enough for blood to well instantly, dripping steadily instead of beading. She held her hand over the open book and let the blood fall, counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 drops instead of 3. Each woman did the same. 7 drops each. 42 drops total. The blood sank into the pages, but this time it left behind something new, a faint shimmer, as though it had reacted with the ink or the parchment itself, glowing briefly before fading. Helena reached into the bowl at the center of the circle and lifted something small. The watchers couldn't see what it was exactly, but it looked metallic, perhaps a piece of jewelry. She held it up. The other women each produced similar objects from their own clothing. "These tokens," Helena said, her voice now formal, almost liturgical, "represent our physical connection to the properties we claim, each inscribed with the legal description of the land or assets we seek to bind. We place them now at the foundation of this binding, anchoring the abstract to material." She placed her token directly onto the pages where her blood had fallen. The others did the same, arranging theirs around the book in a precise pattern. Then Helena produced a small hammer, silver like the knife, and tapped each token once. The sound rang sharply through the cellar. By metal to metal, by blood to intention, by word to outcome, we forged the binding, she said. Then she bent, picked up one of the scattered papers, and began to read, in that strange language the watchers had heard before. Not quite Latin, not quite anything else. The sound of it made their teeth ache, even through the glass. The other women joined in, each reading from their own papers, their voices merging into something that was no longer mere speech. It became vibration, a resonance that was felt more than heard. The sound became something deeper, less heard than felt. The blue-white light intensified, and for a single impossible moment, the air inside the cellar seemed to warp, bending like heat shimmer on a summer road. Distortions rippled around the seated women, making them appear to flicker in and out of solidity. Then it stopped. The light dimmed back to its earlier level. The women fell silent. Helena closed the book with a sharp, echoing snap. Her voice, calm and absolute, cut through the still air. "It is done. The method is complete. The binding is established. Now we wait for the manifestation, which the text promised will become evident within 6 lunar cycles. By the new moon of March next year, we will see the first confirmations. By this time next year, the pattern will be undeniable." One of the women spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "And if nothing happens, if the manifestation doesn't occur?" Helena's answer came cold, unwavering. "Then those who came before us were liars or fools, and we wasted 6 months following a method with no substance. But I do not believe that. I have studied too much, verified too many accounts of women who use these techniques. Women who secured fortunes, established dynasties, protected their daughters from dispossession. This works. It has always worked. It will work for us. The 6 women sat in silence for perhaps 10 minutes, and in that silence, nothing dramatic occurred. No flash of light, no sound, no visible change in the cellar or the world around it. Just 6 women seated in a circle waiting for something that might not even be real, something that could be pure delusion, or perhaps a manipulation of principles found in old books, principles they believed they could apply with scientific precision. But something had changed, something subtle. The 7 watchers couldn't identify it, yet they felt it. The air itself was different, lighter, less oppressive. Whatever pressure they'd felt building all night had released. The copper taste in their mouths faded. The wrongness dissolved, leaving behind only the cool, clean air of a September night. Finally, Helena stood and the others followed. They gathered their papers carefully, placing them into leather cases. Helena retrieved the tokens from the book's pages, returning each to its owner. Then she locked the book with a small brass padlock. They gathered their cloaks, extinguished the strange light, revealing it to be chemical, not supernatural. Phosphorus or something like it. A cold, man-made glow. Then they began climbing the cellar stairs. The 7 watchers fled from the window, racing back to their cabin, arriving just moments before they heard the front door of the main house open and the women emerge. They pressed themselves against the cabin walls, barely breathing, listening. Footsteps on gravel, the rustle of cloaks, soft voices drifting through the darkness. Helena's words carried clearly through the night. We speak of this to no one outside our circle, not to husbands, not to confidants, not even to our own daughters until they are of age to understand and to be trusted. The method works best in secrecy. Exposure weakens the binding. Someone asked quietly, "When do we gather again?" "Not for 6 months," Helena replied. "Not until we can assess whether the manifestation is occurring as predicted. Watch your property cases, your inheritance disputes, your business dealings. Record anything unusual, anything that resolves in your favor against reason or expectation. We'll compare results in March and determine whether to reinforce the binding or the initial establishment holds." The carriage departed swiftly, as always, its wheels crunching over the gravel until the sound faded into silence. Night returned to its ordinary stillness. Inside the cabin, the 7 of them sat in stunned quiet, not because of terror, but confusion. What they had witnessed was exactly what they'd expected, and yet, somehow, far less. "That's it," Rachel whispered. "That's what all this was building toward. Just blood and words and waiting, tokens and papers and promises that something will happen eventually." Moses shook his head slowly. Maybe that's all it ever was. Maybe Helena and those women believe in something that doesn't exist, believe their blood and words can bind the future. Maybe they're just rich people playing at power because they got too much time and too much fear of losing what they have. But Esther, older and more careful, spoke softly. Or maybe we just can't see it yet. Maybe whatever they did tonight, whatever they think they accomplished, won't show itself immediately. Maybe the proof they're waiting for takes time to appear. "They said 6 lunar cycles," Rachel murmured. "So, March. Maybe we wait and watch like they will." Celia, still trembling from what she'd seen, added, "Did you see her face? Helena's? That certainty?" She wasn't guessing. She was sure. She's not stupid. She's educated. She's read more than anyone I've ever met. She's spoken with that German cartographer, with lawyers, and God knows who else. If she believes as strongly that the method works, maybe she knows something we don't. Thomas shook his head. Or maybe education doesn't protect you from needing to feel powerful when you really feel powerless. Maybe all her learning just gave her fancier ways to pretend she controls things nobody can control. Property law, inheritance courts, the future itself. Benjamin, who'd stayed quiet until now, finally spoke. I read some of that book in the library. It talked about women in Europe using these methods for centuries. It described results, actual cases, where women kept property they should have lost, where fortune stayed in female hands despite laws forbidding it. Those cases were documented, verified. Either the documents were forgeries or something about the method actually does produce outcomes. Rachel frowned. But how? How could blood drops and strange words affect property cases and inheritance courts? It doesn't make sense. Moses was silent for a long time before he answered. Maybe it doesn't affect them directly. Maybe the ceremony's psychological. Maybe by performing these rituals, by binding themselves to this belief, the women become more focused, more united, more willing to push boundaries and take risks. Maybe the magic isn't in the blood or the words. Maybe it's in what the rituals make them believe, and how that belief changes what they do in the real world. It was a rational explanation, one that required no supernatural forces, no breaking of natural law. But it didn't explain everything. It didn't explain the shimmer in the cellar air. It didn't explain how the blood had seemed to react. Vaughn's announcement came just 9 days after Mrs. Drummond's victory, both aligning almost perfectly with Helena's prediction. Each new event pulled the thread tighter around their disbelief, weaving coincidence into something that felt disturbingly intentional. By late November, even the skeptics among the seven, Thomas most of all, had grown uneasy. The pattern was too neat, too precise. 2 women out of 6 had already seen impossible fortunes fall neatly into their laps. And Helena? She carried herself with quiet triumph, no longer merely confident but serene, as though her faith had transformed into certainty. At the end of the month, a storm rolled through Willow Bend. Rain and wind so fierce the river nearly rose to the lower fields. When the skies cleared, Benjamin noticed something strange. The old sycamore behind the main house, the one that had been half dead for years, stood upright and whole again, its branches green despite the season. He mentioned it to Moses, who frowned and said, maybe the wind did it, maybe it wasn't dead. But both knew better. December brought a letter addressed to Helena in fine European stationery, bearing the seal of a London solicitor. The message, which Helena read privately but later allowed her sister-in-law to mention at tea, informed her that a long-dormant investment once made by her grandfather had matured unexpectedly. A trading company had revalued old shares, and Helena's name, through a tangle of inheritance, was on the beneficiary list. It was a modest fortune, but the timing chilled the 7 observers more than the news itself. 3 manifestations, 3 women from the circle, each within the same lunar cycle Helena had named. By Christmas, the cabin was thick with whispered debate. Rachel, her voice hushed but trembling, said, if they're shaping luck, if it's real, then what does that mean for us? For everyone else on this land? Celia shook her head. It means they can change things, bend them, maybe not just for themselves. Esther, always the cautious one, added quietly, you remember what Helena said about binding their descendants? About how their blood would carry what they made. That kind of power doesn't come free. Something has to give. Thomas laughed, but without humor. Maybe it's giving through us. The words hung in the cabin's dim air, heavy and unspoken, until Benjamin finally said what they all feared to voice. When Helena cut her hand that night, he said slowly, she let her blood fall on that book. But we were there too, watching, breathing the same air. Maybe that was enough to tie us in, like witnesses to a contract. No one answered. Outside, the night insects droned, and far off, a coyote called, its cry thin and mournful beneath the winter stars. Inside, none of them spoke again until dawn. You think you understand what you witnessed. You think you've documented something that holds meaning or consequence, but you've seen only fragments, reflections on the surface of something far deeper than you can imagine. What you call evidence is nothing but the shadow of a truth that will outlast all of us. Her words carried no anger, only quiet conviction. the tone of someone who believed she stood at the center of something immense and inevitable. Helena folded the pages carefully, placed them on a small table beside her, and looked at each of them in turn. "I could destroy this," she said softly. "I could burn it, and the world would never know. But I won't. You've written what you saw, and that's fair. You've done what people always do when they encounter something beyond their comprehension. You've tried to make it smaller, safer, by putting it into words. Keep it if you wish. Hide it again. It makes no difference to me. What's done cannot be undone." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "If you ever speak of this beyond these walls, no one will believe you. They will call it superstition, madness, or lies. And in time, even you'll begin to wonder if any of it was real." Then she left, taking with her that quiet, unshakable certainty that terrified them far more than any threat could. For days afterward, none of them spoke of what had happened. The hidden pages remained under the floorboard, untouched, but they all knew Helena was aware of them, that she had chosen to let them exist. The decision made no sense unless she truly believed her actions were unassailable, that no record, no words, could challenge the reality she had created. The summer of 1846 passed uneasily. Strange reports continued to reach Willowbend. More legal victories, more unexpected inheritances among Helena's associates. The pattern persisted with mathematical precision, each occurrence reinforcing the others. By autumn, Helena's influence in Montgomery society had grown considerably. She was consulted on matters of estate and investment, her advice sought by women who just a year before had ignored her entirely. Yet beneath that surface success, the 7 who had witnessed her ceremonies felt an increasing dread. They couldn't explain it, but they sensed a shift in the air around the plantation, as if something unseen was tightening its grip. Animals avoided the main house. Tools went missing, only to reappear in strange places. And sometimes in the deep hours of the night, faint sounds came from the cellar, soft tapping, like metal striking stone, though no one dared investigate. Benjamin began to add these new details to the hidden manuscript. "If this is part of what they made," he wrote, "then it means the method changes more than fortunes. It alters the air, the ground, perhaps even the people who live beneath its reach." By winter, several of the witnesses had fallen ill. Nothing dramatic, only fatigue, headaches, fevers that came and went without cause. Celia was the first to suggest the possibility that their proximity to the rituals, their act of watching, had left a mark on them, some invisible residue of the binding itself. Moses dismissed it at first, insisting it was coincidence, but as the weeks passed, even he began to look uneasy. In February of 1847, a courier brought news from Montgomery. Catherine Drummond had died suddenly in her sleep, without illness or warning. The newspapers called it natural causes. Helena received the news in silence, then ordered the household into mourning for a week. But that night, Esther swore she heard Helena speaking alone in the library, not praying, not grieving, but reciting words in that same strange language they had heard through the cellar window. Benjamin recorded that too. "She spoke as though continuing what had begun before," he wrote. "Not grief, but reaffirmation, as if death itself was only another step in whatever pattern they created." By the spring of 1847, the 7 had finished their account. They sealed the pages inside a small tin box, wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from dampness, and buried it beneath the oldest oak near the edge of the property. "If Willowbend ever falls," Moses said, "someone might dig here. Someone might find the truth." None of them could have imagined that more than a century later, in the ruins of the old plantation, that box would indeed be found. Its pages still legible, its story waiting to be told. But you don't understand, and you can't. The method I use has been practiced for centuries by women who had no other recourse, no other means of securing their futures against laws and systems designed to strip them of everything. What I did was no more sinister than what lawyers do when they exploit loopholes in statutes, no more supernatural than what doctors do when they apply scientific principles most people can't comprehend. She paused then, letting her gaze settle on each of them in turn. "I'm not angry that you watched," she said quietly. "I knew you would. I'm not even angry that you wrote it down. But I am disappointed that you've turned a natural methodology into something it's not." She moved closer, her tone steady, almost instructive. "The binding I established works through psychology and probability, through careful planning and mutual support among women who refuse to be denied. There's no magic in it, nothing that breaks the laws of nature. It's simply human will, applied with scientific precision." Then, without hesitation, Helena reached for the pages they had written and fed them to the fire. The paper curled, blackened, and disintegrated, each word turning to ash. "You'll tell no one what you saw," she said calmly. "Not because I fear they'll believe you. They won't. But because I'd rather not have rumors spreading that could complicate my social standing. In return, I'll continue to treat you fairly as I always have. That's my offer. Accept it or face consequences that will serve no one's interests." They accepted. Of course they did. What else could they do? But Esther, gathering what little courage she had left, spoke up before Helena could leave. "Did it work?" she asked. "The ceremony, the binding, did it really work?" Helena's lips curved into a faint smile. "Look at my circumstances now compared to a year ago. Look at the women who stood beside me. Draw your own conclusions. Just remember, correlation isn't causation. And sometimes the most powerful magic is simply refusing to accept the limitations others try to impose." She left them with that, a careful ambiguity, a non-answer that could mean everything or nothing. And they lived with it, burdened by the knowledge they couldn't prove, couldn't share, couldn't act upon. Only remember and wonder,